Kody Brown has always carried himself with a boldness that borders on arrogance, and for years that confidence fueled the central tension on Sister Wives. As the patriarch of a large polygamous family, he spent over a decade presenting himself as a man in command, the one who could juggle multiple wives, dozens of children, and a complicated public persona all at once. Yet the tide has turned for him in recent seasons, and his once unshakable authority has begun to crumble in ways both subtle and obvious. The newest chapter in his story unfolded recently while he was filming a new gig that was supposed to signal a reinvention for him after his family's collapse, but instead it left him facing criticism, humbling experiences, and a reminder that he is not invincible. Reports from set suggest that Kody was, in many ways, knocked down to size, and those who have watched his trajectory are finding the moment strangely fitting. The gig in question was designed as part of the ongoing push to keep Kody in the spotlight despite the dwindling interest in his polygamous household. With Christine remarried, Janelle walking away, and Mary moving on to pursue her own path, Robin remains his only active partner, and fans have noticed how desperately he seems to cling to visibility. Producers believed there was still interest in seeing how Kody could transition into a new kind of project. It wasn't meant to be another family-centered reality program. Instead, it leaned more into a lifestyle and personality-driven concept, highlighting Kody's opinions, philosophies, and attempts to prove he had wisdom worth sharing. In theory, the show would capitalize on the notoriety his name still carries. But filming revealed cracks, as Kody's overconfidence clashed with the practical challenges of production, and those watching from behind the scenes say it was evident he no longer had the effortless sway he once commanded. The most striking part of this new venture is the way Kody has had to confront a different kind of audience. On Sister Wives, much of the dynamic was built on his wives either catering to his authority or pushing back in ways that created drama, but ultimately the show itself orbited around his choices. Even when the spotlight turned to Christine's heartbreak or Janelle's quiet frustration, the narrative often looped back to Kody as the source of conflict. In this new gig, though, he found himself surrounded by producers, assistants, and even guest collaborators who were not invested in maintaining his image. They weren't his family, nor were they beholden to his temper or demands. When Kody insisted on steering conversations toward his familiar tirades about loyalty, betrayal, or fatherhood, he was met with resistance. He was expected to listen, to adapt, and to follow directions in order for filming to proceed smoothly. For a man so used to controlling the terms of discussion, this was a kind of professional culture shock. Multiple insiders have described moments where Kody raised his voice only to be told directly that he needed to adjust, something unheard of during his family's years of appeasing him for the sake of household peace. Perhaps the most symbolic knockdown moment occurred during a particular filming day when Kody attempted to deliver one of his passionate monologues. Known for his booming tone and his ability to rant endlessly about loyalty and principles, he believed he was making good television. But the producers cut him short, asking him to focus and keep things concise. He reportedly grew agitated, pacing the set and gesturing wildly as he insisted that his way of speaking was integral to who he was. Instead of bending to his will, production staff stood their ground, telling him plainly that what works in his living room does not translate to the kind of show they were trying to build. Those present described the exchange as tense but ultimately revealing because for the first time in a long while Kody had to submit. Cameras caught a subdued version of him, lips pressed thin as he begrudgingly toned down his outburst. That visual, a deflated Kody learning he couldn't bulldoze his way through, spread quickly among those who witnessed it, and word has since leaked to fans who are now buzzing about how the mighty patriarch seems suddenly so small. Another layer of this knockdown experience is how Kody's public reputation has shifted. When Sister Wives first aired, curiosity fueled interest. He was a man willing to open the doors of his unconventional household to cameras, and whether viewers supported or criticized him, they kept watching. But over time, the show peeled away the glossy facade and revealed the fractures within the family, fractures that many believe were exacerbated by Cody's favoritism toward Robin and his dismissive treatment of the other wives. Audiences went from intrigue to disappointment and eventually to outright disdain. Today, online forums overflow with criticism of his behavior, and many fans openly root against him. This sentiment has carried into his new gig, where executives hoped his notoriety could still be monetized, but early reactions suggest skepticism. Even before the show has premiered, whispers about his behavior on set have tainted anticipation. Instead of being celebrated as a rebrand, the project is being framed as another stage for his ego, and this perception has forced Cody to confront an unflattering reality. He is not as influential as he once believed. Interestingly, this humbling process has parallels to what happened in his personal life. Christine's departure was the first major domino to fall, and her refusal to continue living under Cody's authority became a turning point not just for the family but also for the audience's perception of him. She walked away, rebuilt her life, and publicly shared stories that painted Cody in an unfavorable light, especially regarding intimacy and emotional neglect. Janelle followed by asserting her independence, making it clear that she too no longer wished to play along. Even Mary, who for years lingered on the margins, ultimately acknowledged the futility of trying to win Cody's affection back. Each wife leaving stripped him of the power he had carefully cultivated, and by the time he was left with only Robin, it was difficult to ignore that the Emperor had lost his clothes. Now, with this new professional setback during filming, it feels as though the same dynamic has followed him into the workplace. Just as his wives once dared to stand up to him, so too have producers and collaborators, reminding him that dominance does not translate across every environment. One of the most revealing anecdotes involves Cody's attempt to recreate the kind of family head role he once relished. At one point during filming, he reportedly insisted on making executive decisions about set design and production choices, trying to assert that his vision was paramount. But unlike in his household, where pushing back risked emotional fallout, the crew simply overruled him. They had their own creative team, their own budget constraints, and their own understanding of what worked for television. Cody's ideas were dismissed, and while he initially bristled, he had no real authority to override them. Observers noted how visibly frustrated he became, muttering under his breath about how people didn't understand his style. Yet in the end, he complied. That compliance, however begrudging, is what many see as the ultimate evidence that he has been knocked down to size. For years, he has styled himself as a man who cannot be controlled, and yet here he was, quietly backing down when faced with people who simply refused to indulge him. What makes this unfolding drama even more fascinating is how Cody himself interprets it. True to form, he has reportedly framed these challenges as part of a larger narrative in which he is misunderstood. He sees himself as a man unfairly maligned by fans and betrayed by family members, now struggling to find his footing in an industry that doesn't respect him. Those close to the project suggest he continues to blame others for the difficulties, rather than recognizing how his own behavior contributes. In his mind, he is still the protagonist, the one trying to carry a vision forward against obstacles. But outside of his perspective, the consensus is growing that he is no longer the larger-than-life personality he imagines. Instead, he is a man reduced, forced to reckon with a loss of authority both at home and at work. Of course, the irony of this situation is not lost on longtime viewers of Sister Wives. Many remember the countless times Cody lectured his wives about humility, sacrifice, and the need to accept his leadership. He scolded them for questioning his decisions, demanded obedience, and equated disagreement with betrayal. Now the tables have turned, and he is the one being told to sit down, listen, and compromise. The reversal of roles is poetic in its justice, and for fans who have long grown weary of his bravado, the reports of him being knocked down to size are almost cathartic. Online communities have erupted with commentary, with many declaring that this is exactly what Cody needed. A dose of reality outside the bubble of his own household drama. The broader question, however, is whether Cody will learn from this experience or whether he will double down. If history is any indication, humility does not come easily to him. He has, time and again, dismissed criticism rather than absorb it, and has chosen defensiveness over self-reflection. Yet the longer this pattern continues, the harder it will be for him to find new opportunities in entertainment. Networks and production companies may be willing to take risks on controversial figures, but they also require cooperation, and if Cody cannot adapt, he risks alienating the very industry that has given him relevance. For now, the project remains in limbo, its premiere uncertain, and its future clouded by doubts about whether audiences want more of Cody's voice in the first place. Ultimately, the image of Cody being knocked down to size while filming a new gig resonates because it encapsulates the larger story of his life in recent years. He is no longer the commanding patriarch at the center of a sprawling family. He is no longer the uncontested authority in his household. And now, he is discovering that even in a professional setting, his dominance carries little weight. Stripped of the deference he once demanded, Cody stands exposed. A man learning, reluctantly and painfully, that power is not permanent, and that respect must be earned rather than imposed. For those who have watched him for years, the sight of Cody humbled may feel like the natural culmination of a long and turbulent saga. Cody Brown has spent more than a decade on national television cultivating the image of a man in control, a patriarch who believed he was destined to lead his large plural family with authority and purpose. On Sister Wives, his booming personality and relentless declarations about loyalty, unity, and obedience framed the entire story. For years, Cody cast himself as the center of gravity, the figure around whom 4 wives and 18 children revolved. Yet with each passing season, the cracks in that carefully crafted identity deepened. Today, as new revelations and behind-the-scenes accounts spill out, the question being asked is whether Cody's once seemingly indestructible ego has finally been slammed in a way he cannot recover from. The unraveling of his ego is rooted in both the collapse of his family and the collapse of his public image. One time, viewers watched the show with fascination, curious about how plural marriage functioned day to day. The wives appeared cooperative, the children seemed happy, and Cody strutted through scenes with an air of confidence that bordered on smugness. He spoke often of leadership, of divine inspiration, of his right to guide the family as he saw fit. But the facade began to crumble as relationships soured. Christine eventually walked away, citing years of emotional neglect and the absence of intimacy. Janelle grew weary of his constant berating and favoritism, asserting her independence and separating her life from his. Mary, who had long been relegated to the fringes, finally acknowledged that she could not continue fighting for a husband who no longer wanted her. Each departure chipped away at the very foundation of Cody's self-image, because his sense of worth was tied to his role as the head of a united household. When 3 wives rejected him, the rejection echoed louder than any public praise. For fans who followed the drama, watching Cody's ego unravel has been both riveting and unsettling. His tendency to lash out, blame others, and refuse accountability became glaring as the series progressed. Rather than accepting that his own behavior played a role in the breakdown of the marriages, he often accused his wives of betrayal or disloyalty. Christine was framed as ungrateful, Janelle as rebellious, Mary as detached. Yet the public increasingly saw through these accusations. Online communities dissected every episode, highlighting how Cody shifted responsibility away from himself and used anger as a shield against self-reflection. The more he doubled down on his narrative, the more his ego appeared fragile rather than firm. It was no longer the confident stride of a leader, but the defensive posturing of a man unwilling to admit defeat. Tell-all specials in recent seasons only amplified this perception. When confronted with Christine's painful admissions about their lack of intimacy, Cody attempted to spin the story as though she had sabotaged their relationship. When Janelle pointed out his favoritism toward Robin, he denied it vehemently, even as clips played showing him prioritizing Robin's needs above all others. His fury in those moments was not the fury of a man wronged, but of a man whose authority was slipping through his fingers. Fans described watching his expressions contort with indignation as he realized he could no longer control the narrative. It was a spectacle of ego in collapse, and viewers were both shocked and vindicated. Having long suspected that Cody's pride was his greatest weakness. Away from the cameras, reports from insiders paint a similar picture. Production crews who once tiptoed around his outbursts now speak more openly about how difficult he was to work with. His long rants, which were once treated as good television, became disruptive to filming. Directors had to cut him off, insisting he be more concise. He resisted, arguing that his voice and style were essential to the show. But those present saw him as a man struggling to adapt, trying to maintain dominance in a world that had grown tired of indulging him. Each time he was silenced or redirected, the blow to his ego was visible, even if he attempted to mask it with forced bravado. Vindicated. The most telling aspect of his ego being slammed, however, comes not from producers or critics but from his children. In recent years, many of the Brown children have grown increasingly vocal about their father's favoritism and neglect. Several have publicly aligned themselves with their mothers, voicing support for Christine, Janelle, and Mary. Others have distanced themselves from Cody altogether, expressing pain over how fractured their family became. To a man whose self-worth was tied to being the leader of a great and thriving household, the estrangement of his children represents a profound blow. It undermines the narrative he clings to of being a guiding force, instead painting him as a divisive figure who alienated the very people he claimed to protect. Robin remains the lone wife at his side, but even that partnership fuels criticism. To many fans, Robin represents the symbol of Cody's ego unchecked, the validation he sought while alienating others. His favoritism toward her has been described by viewers as blatant, even cruel, as he showered Robin and her children with attention while neglecting the rest of his family. Public consensus is that Cody built a new monogamous marriage under the guise of pluralism, and in doing so revealed that his earlier claims about fairness and unity were hollow. This perception has bruised his ego in ways that he cannot easily conceal, because no matter how passionately he defends himself on camera, the audience has largely decided otherwise. The collapse of his larger-than-life image has also extended into his professional ambitions. While Cody once believed his name and personality could carry him into new projects, the reception has been tepid. Attempts to pivot into other ventures, whether through reality spin-offs or lifestyle content, have faced skepticism. Audiences have grown weary of his lectures and rants, craving instead the stories of his ex-wives who seem to be thriving without him. Christine, in particular, has emerged as a fan favorite, her remarriage and happiness standing in stark contrast to Cody's continued bitterness. For every triumphant social media post from Christine or Janelle, Cody's image grows dimmer. His ego,